Have you ever had the moment when you're looking at your to-do list for the day and you're like, I have to record a podcast, and you're thinking, why do I even bother? I've been there. You've been there. Every podcaster I've ever talked to has been there sometimes. And I want to say that this is rarely a sign that your podcast is the problem. It's often the symptom of a larger pain in your business. And that's what I want to get down to today, because there are ways that your podcast can help magnify where there are discomforts, where there are issues that need to be addressed in your business, in your larger marketing, in your larger offers, in your larger ideal client, in your positioning, in your messaging. Your podcast can bring a lot to light. So let's talk about it. Welcome to the More Profitable Podcast with Stacey Harris. I'm Stacey, and this is the spot to learn more about the strategies, tactics, and tools you need to build your more profitable podcast. My team and I work every day with podcasters like you to shift shows from frustrating time sucks to productive members of your sales team, because your show should be built to generate and convert leads. So let's get into it. My goal is to make this another one of those short and sweet kind of conversations, because I really want you to sit with this one, and I really want you to look at where your instinct is to throw the baby out with the bathwater, is to say the podcast isn't working when you don't want to do it. Because honestly, when I sit down with clients, either for their initial kickoff for production, or frankly, this comes up a lot more often in my podcast strategy intensives, when we sit down and we look at it, oftentimes that data kind of shows us where there's gaps other places. And this is one of those things where I am a podcaster. I'm a podcast consultant. I'm a podcast strategist. We talk about podcasting here, but a lot of what I'm going to talk to you about today is actually not going to be about your podcast, because success with your podcast and success in our work together often comes from your work with someone else. And that could be a coach. It could be with your team. It could be with a business friend. It could be work you do alone, but it has very little to do with your podcast. But our podcast feeling off or struggling to get our podcast done can start to provide us some insight, because oftentimes we'll sit down and we'll think, this thing is broken. This thing is not working. So let me rename it, rebrand it. Let's get new cover art. Let's change up the format. So maybe if you're somebody who's currently doing interviews, you stop doing interviews and you go all solo. Maybe if you're somebody who's doing a solo show, you start thinking, I need to bring in guests to grow my audience. The other way this comes up is video. Like if you're doing an audio only show and suddenly you think the only way your podcast is going to be successful is if you add video, not true. Not true at all. Your audience plays a big part in that decision, right? There's a reason this show does not really have a video component yet. It's twofold. I don't really want to do it, between you, me, and the people in your car right now. And the other side of that is, most of the people who I talk to don't really want to consume this that way. They like that we're able to walk the dog, go for a walk after lunch, pick up the kids, whatever, together. We hang out on the move. And so shifting everything and saying, hey, I'm going to add video because that's what will make this successful, might actually just leave my existing audience behind. And more importantly, I know for a fact it will leave some of my potential customers behind, because the folks I'm asking these questions to are actually not listeners of the show exclusively. They're listeners of the show who are also my clients, because that's who I'm building the show for. People who could and will become clients. The last thing that we often think is broken is us. I cannot count, I cannot convey the frequency at which people tell me maybe I just suck at this. Maybe I'm just bad. Maybe this just isn't the right fit for me because I'm not good at it. I'm not like you, Stacey. I can't sit there and talk to myself. Well, first of all, yes, you can. Okay, I promise. This is not that hard. It's uncomfortable, but it's not difficult. Those are different sensations, and I think it's important that we acknowledge that. But none of these things are going to move the needle. None of these things are actually going to reveal some sort of magical combination that gets you the success you want or gets you to the place you want to be. What they're going to do is make you feel like you're doing something. Even if, frankly, that something is no more than beating yourself up. I don't know why beating ourselves up feels productive, but it seems to, right? There's nothing quite as productive as breaking down what's wrong with me. However, it's actually not super helpful. And so I want to look today at how we can shift this and understand what the underlying problem might actually be that can help shift our podcast forward. Before we do that, I want to invite you to drop me a question for our private podcast newsroom, because I drop 2 new episodes each and every month for you right over there, answering listener questions from folks like you. So if you're using your podcast as a business resource, as a marketing tool, as a sales asset, and you have a question, you have a frustration, you have something you'd like more information on, you want to know how you could do something, you want to know what you might shift in something, I want you to reach out and I want you to let me know, because those are the kinds of questions we're answering over there. Even better, if you're sitting there right now and you're going, I have no questions, I'm cool, I actually feel really solid in this. Head on over and subscribe, because hearing questions from other people is often a really great way to either confirm that we're on the right track or, and this is much more common for me, bring to the surface questions I wasn't really sure I had and either answer them with the episode, which happens a lot based on the emails I get, but also invites the question I do need to ask to the surface, and so I'm able to ask it. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. So head on over to uncommonlymore.com/newsroom and sign up for the private feed, and of course, uncommonlymore.ama to submit your question for a future episode. With that reminder in hand, I want to shift back to our conversation today. And let's start by talking about why it's so easy for your podcast to feel like the problem. First and foremost, it's the most high touch component of your marketing. And so it feels really easy to blame. And by high touch, I mean there's a lot of pieces. Your mind is on it. No one is passively podcasting, right? I need you to understand that part of the reason social media and podcasting feel hard, and video, like long form or short form content, it doesn't matter. The reason that feels hard is because you have to do it. It doesn't just happen. It's not like way back in when you took an ad out in the yellow pages. That was your marketing. I know I just sounded 100, but you remember, right? Right? I need you to remember or it'll lie to me. But it's easy to feel the frustration of it because it's right there, because it's at the surface, because it's at the tip of your tongue, because it's the thing that shows up on your to-do list every single week. So it's easy to blame it for not working. But often it is doing its job. It just feels uncomfortable because the job it's doing is not the job you want it to do. It's the job you're currently setting it up to do, which are not always the same thing, and generally speaking, actually the problem. But if we can shift our perspective and start looking at how our podcast can be a magnifying glass for the actual problem, then we start to get into how do we solve this? How do we get clear on how to fix this? And so I want you to start by asking yourself a series of questions. And I'm going to give you these right now, and I will include them in the show notes, because these questions are going to help you identify if your podcast is actually a problem or if it's just built on a sandy foundation. The first one, and actually, before I get into the first one, I want you to promise me something. You're going to be honest with yourself. And if necessary, do this with a friend. I have talked about this before, but one of the things I like doing at the end of the year is thinking about my wins for the year, because it's something that I'm not great at. I'm really good at identifying the 47 things I want to do better next year, and not even one thing I did well the previous year. And so one of the things I do at the end of every year is I sit down with friends and we play the and game, which is we name off our wins, and then the people around us say and, and force you to keep going. If you're struggling with this alone, find an and friend. Find somebody who can say and, and really push you to dig a little deeper. Now, the questions. Number 1, is my offer clear and easy to buy? If you're confused by your offer, if you're struggling to sell your offer outside of your podcast, it's often a matter of a lack of clarity in your offer. The other side of that is it easy to buy? You know, I would sell a ton more on this podcast if I was selling you a $27 click to buy product. I just would. It's easier to sell in theory, right? There's not a whole lot of thought about it, and you certainly don't need to talk to me first. However, a minimum 12-month production contract with a larger than $27 investment, our production contracts start at $1,800 a month. That's a bigger conversation. That's a, hey, I'd like to talk to you first. So there are additional steps, right? You've got to book a call, you got to talk to me. There are things in there that make it more difficult. But that's intentional. I have also seen podcasts where that's not intentional. I want you to book a call. I want us to have a conversation because I don't want to be working with you for the next 12 months if I'm not the best fit, if I'm not what's really going to help. A great example of this is someone who is building a show and an audience where the backbone of it is sponsorship. I build shows that sell services, coaching, consulting, done for you services. Those are the kind of shows I build. That's where my expertise lies. And I have some knowledge, and I'm going to be honest with you, I'm actively expanding my knowledge on the sponsor side because more and more we're finding that our clients have an interest in kind of hybriding. Like, what does it look like to have a both and, where we have sponsors that are supportive, that are good additional pieces in addition to the work we do. Maybe it's stuff that's involved in our work or complementary to our services. And we sell our services through the podcast. And so it's something I'm absolutely expanding on, but that as the primary sort of mode of monetization is just not my expertise. And so I want to make sure we talk first. With that said, there are some business owners who are using their podcast to drive traffic, to drive sales, but when you go to their website, you can't find an offer. I mean, at all. There's nary a work with me page to be found. And so if you're making it difficult for me to go find the thing you sell me, it doesn't matter how enticing you make it sound on your podcast. It doesn't matter the quality and caliber of case studies you have. I'm not working that hard to buy it. Most people aren't. So, first question, is my offer clear and easy to buy? Second question, is this podcast connecting to that offer regularly and directly? And this is often where you need that and person. Because what I find for a lot of folks, especially in that first 18-ish, like 12 to 18 months into your podcast, right? So you're hitting probably episode like 50 to 75. You start to think about all the things you've already talked about and how you don't want to repeat yourself. And so you definitely have to start thinking of something new to say. And you start sort of drifting further and further and further and further from your topic, from your expertise. I see this happen a lot when we start adding guests that are not a super good fit for the audience. I see this happen a lot where we start adding guests for the sake of growth, which we know my thoughts on. I see this a lot when we start building our show based on the answers we get in Instagram polls when we ask people what they would like us to talk about on our podcasts. This can be such a slippery slope. And if this is sort of rubbing you the wrong way, if this is where you're feeling that discomfort, you're not alone. I think this is probably, honestly, it's probably the place I see this issue come up the most when I talk to people in podcast strategy intensives, where it's just like somewhere along the way, they were so afraid they were going to repeat themselves that their content has nothing to do with what they sell. It's like tangentially connected. I see this a lot in service providers who end up building shows that are really turning them into business coaches for other people in their field. So web designers who start talking about web design and about managing clients and about organizing projects, and they think they're talking about their expertise, and they are, except only to people who are also web designers or graphic designers or life coaches or whatever it is, podcast strategists and producers. This is so easy to happen. Third question, am I sending traffic to the podcast consistently? Are you marketing the show? Do you tell people when it comes out? And I'm sorry, but I don't just mean your email. I don't just mean you send an email to your list that there's a new episode out. I mean, are you promoting it on your social channels? Are you talking about it when you're at events? When I introduce myself to somebody, I say I'm a podcast producer, but I also say I'm a podcast host. I also talk about the show. When I am supporting people in a community, when I am speaking from the stage, when I am introducing myself in a networking room, I'm talking about my services and my podcast because it is a marketing tool. And it's a whole lot easier for me to get you to go listen to my podcast for free than it is for me to convince you to buy something from me right now in the 13 seconds we talk to each other. And I'm also creating threads and LinkedIn posts and Instagram posts, and we're playing with a little Pinterest right now, but I don't know how I feel about it. But my point is, I'm promoting the show. I'm getting these assets out and in front of people all the time. And if you're not doing that, it's part of the reason your show feels like it doesn't work. It's part of the reason you feel like your show's not growing. The next one, fourth question. Are my calls to action actually aligned with where the listener is in the buying process? This one is tough because you're going to have listeners who are at all different points, but you've got to be building assets for those different touchstones. And what I find is a lot of podcasters who I sit down with in a podcast strategy intensive who are 6 to 12 months into their podcast is their calls to action are all geared at new listeners, because they have spent so much time just trying to get people to listen to the show, just trying to get people to rate and review the show, just trying to get people introduced and on board, that they're never talking to someone who's about to buy. They're super hesitant to do things like an audio sales page because there's like nobody wants to listen to that. Yeah, somebody does. The person who's about to hit the buy now button, the person who's about to book the call, they want to hear what happens inside the process, what the process looks like, what's going to be expected of them. And when we're building episodes only for people who just found us, just that sort of introduction content and not the downstream content of educating them into a decision and inviting them into that decision, then we're going to struggle to convert folks, because folks who are ready to buy are going to get sick of sitting in the maybe. They're going to be like, oh, she's not talking to me. She's talking to people who are not quite there yet. And honestly, they're probably not going to know that. It's just going to be, this isn't for me. The next question, number 5. Am I being consistent enough to stay top of mind? And I want to be really clear here. Consistency is not just releasing the episodes. You can put out an episode every week and your show be ineffective and your show be inconsistent. Your messaging has to be consistent. Who you're talking to has to be consistent. How you show up has to be consistent. Your topic has to be consistent. And realize right now that consistent is going to feel repetitive. But no one else is listening to you the way you're listening to you. I'm going to say it again. No one else is listening to you the way you are listening to you. So what feels repetitive to you and I as the host, as the person sitting in our offices, sitting in our studios, talking to ourselves for hours at a time, it feels repetitive. But for our listeners, for our prospects, it's consistency. It's education. It's training. It's building trust. Final question, am I speaking to the right people or the loudest ones? And this is where I come back to, are you creating content for the people who you want to be working with? Or are you creating content for people in your DMs who have never paid you a dime and aren't going to? Because those folks are not going to buy. I'm not saying that anybody in your DMs asking you a question is trying to get everything for free. No. But we immediately, when I said that, because there's somebody that came to mind for you, right? They're the person who replies to your emails, who DMs you, who comments on your stories, and has maybe been in your world. I have some that have been in my world 5+ years, and they're great. I enjoy them, but I don't build content for them. They might also like the content I'm building, but it's not for them. It's not who I'm thinking about when I make decisions about my show. Who I'm thinking about when I make decisions for my show are the people already working with me who started working with me after they listened to the podcast. Because I want more of them. I am building content for my best clients. And for the folks who listen and are like, I'm in, they become my best clients. I can tell you that because I've been working with them for years now. The folks who are noisy and supportive are fantastic, but I'm never going to prioritize their question over one from somebody who's fit to be a client, somebody who is a client. So are you talking to the right people or the loudest ones? Most of the time, it is not about doing more. It's not about making some sort of massive shift to your show. It's not about burning the show down and trying a new thing, giving up audio podcasting and launching a video series, quitting your podcast and going all in on social media, TikTok, Threads, whatever it is. It's not about doing more. It's about refining your actions so that you're doing what you're doing with purpose and with intention. Because here's the reality. Your podcast is very likely not broken. What it might be is under-strategized or overwhelming. And there are solutions to that. Sitting down with somebody and making sure that you're able to answer the way you want to the questions we've talked about today. Big ones being, is my offer clear and easy to buy? Is the podcast connected and offer to that offer and regularly directing them there? It might be working with somebody. If that's the case, a podcast strategy intensive might be a great fit for you, because what we're going to do is we're going to audit your show and we're going to answer those questions. We're going to make sure. And then we're going to build a podcast strategy where the answer to that question is yes. We're going to build that clarity in so that you're able to answer the way you want to be answering. If it's sitting in overwhelm, then it's time to get some support or change the support you've got. We primarily work with podcasters in existing shows, meaning when they sign up with us, they've either been DIYing for a while, or frankly, more commonly, they've been working with a different production partner for a while who they're not really happy with, but the idea of changing sounds awful. Frankly, it just sounds like the worst. And I'm going to be honest with you, it's not Super Funsville. It never is. It's always easier to stay a little uncomfortable than go through the effort of changing that discomfort. But when you do, you will find a whole new better side on the other side. And the great lesson here is because you've worked with somebody, you know what you want and you know what you don't want. It's one of the things I love about working with clients who are making this move. We just moved somebody earlier this year from another production partner to working with us in Q1, and it was incredible the response I got after they got their first episodes, because they were having to do a lot of crazy stuff before, like completely re-edit their transcripts, completely re-edit their podcasts in some cases, make massive changes. And now we get the content, we do the things, we release the episodes, we've reduced their workload. And again, this is somebody who was moving from a different production partner, not DIYing. We have removed hours from their weekly to-do list in podcast production just because they're working with a better fit partner. So if it's overwhelmed that you're currently sitting in, get some production support. We have spots to start working with us in Q2. I'd love for your show to be one of those shows. I would love to alleviate some of this frustration for you. If you're feeling frustrated though, burning it down is not the answer. It is a signal. It is a sign for you to step back and reassess the whole system, making sure that it is built to do what you want to do. If your podcast is not doing what you want it to do, stop guessing. Stop trying to duct tape this together and push through. You and I can figure this out together, because that's what I built the Podcast Strategy Intensive to do. You can grab yours right now at uncommonlymore.com/intensive. We will kick off by doing a full audit. I will look under the hood. I will look at your show. I will answer these questions as an objective third party. And then you and I will come together and we will discuss that. And we will move forward by building a strategy that actually works for you. Because your podcast needs to be pulling its weight. But it can only pull its weight if you've given it something worth pulling. You have to make sure that you're building a show worth the lift. All right? uncommonlymore.com/intensive so that we can make sure you're building something worth carrying. All right? I'll see you right back here next week. Thanks so much for listening to the show. Remember that content consumption does not make changes. So commit to doing something from today's episode. Maybe it's taking action on what we talked about. Maybe it's reaching out to me and learning more about podcast strategy intensives or what podcast production looks like with our team. All of that is over at uncommonlymore.com. And if you haven't yet signed up for the podcast newsroom, I want to remind you that is a great next step. If you're not really sure what comes next, hang out over there. Get those exclusive private episodes. That's over at podcastnewsroom.com. And the last favor I will ask, because social proof is endlessly important for sure, is to leave a rating or review for the show. If you go to ratethispodcast.com/more, that's the easiest way to do it. But I would love to hear what you thought of the show, what you think of the show, and if the show has been helpful for you. I can't wait to chat with you. So this is just the start of the conversation. Reach out so we can keep it going. Talk soon.